There's a lot that happens each week in city and town government in Ithaca. And sometimes we're simply not able to dive into all those issues as deeply as we'd like. So now we are starting something that we hope will be a semi-regular segment to talk about these issues with someone who covers them in depth. Michael Nocella is a reporter with the Ithaca Times and that very person. And tonight we're going to be talking about PUDs. Hi, Michael. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
So this week, I understand the Common Council approved an ordinance that would allow PUDs, or planned unit developments in the city. Can you explain to us what a PUD actually is?
Yeah, well, so Common Council actually approved the legislation to introduce PUD into the city code last Wednesday. And so they define it as a floating overlay zone which may be placed within the city boundaries anywhere deemed appropriate by the Common Council. The purpose of a PUD is to encourage and allow more creative and imaginative design of land development than is possible under standard zoning district regulations. A PUD allows for the flexibility in planning and design, while through the process of review, discussion, and law change ensures efficient investment in public improvements. Every time I've heard PUD described or explained to me, the first word that comes up is flexibility. It is almost kind of not a loophole, I don't want to say, but it definitely allows more to go on than your other zones, and it's a tool for a developer to wield when they're kind of pinned in a corner to where they have a development that might not fit into the current zoning. They could kind of go through the application for a PUD and help that move the process along.
Gotcha. So it maybe frees things up from zoning codes, zoning laws as they exist in a city.
Yes.
And so if we think about a developer applying for a PUD, I understand there are certain qualifications that have to be met. Could you maybe talk about those for us?
Right. So this whole PUD development in Ithaca is kind of going hand in hand with the Emerson site in mind, and the legislation that was crafted by the city. The application for the PUD was kind of, if you read through it, it's not a coincidence. And the four, main things that this application asks is that all land within the proposed PUD is zoned industrial, and 2, does the project further the health and welfare of the community? 3, is the project in accordance with the city comprehensive plan? And 4, does the project create at least one long-term significant community benefit? And all 4 of those things, like I said, not a coincidence, seem to fit the description of the Emerson site, and that is something that is going hand in hand with this process. Yeah,
and you mentioned the Emerson site. For our maybe listeners who don't know what you're talking about, could you explain what that is?
Yeah, so the Emerson site is it's the building that you would see. It's a huge white building that sits up on the hill. You might spot it driving down Route 13 towards the city, and it is 800,000 square feet of building, and the property is 95 acres, and it's been kind of out of commission for quite a while now. And Unchained Properties, which is headed by David Lubin, have for the last, I don't know quite how long it's been, but at least for more than a year, have been looking to reinvigorate this property.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if we think about the fact that, a developer applying for a PUD essentially frees them up to do things that traditional zoning regulations might not allow them to do. But, I mean, won't this kind of zoning maybe designation just kind of create a free-for-all in this space?
No, there have been residents that have come out to some of these meetings regarding PUD who have they're wary of it. But the way city officials went about crafting the legislation for the application of a PUD, they did that with that fear in mind, and they're well aware of the concerns from residents and things that might have happened in other towns. And the fact that any developer trying to use a PUD on their land has to be zoned as an industrial prior to that kind of limits the amount of developers who would even be able to think about a PUD.
Mm-hmm. And I'm also imagining that these only being approved in industrial zones, right? You can't imagine a warehouse is going to be the kind of neighbor that's going to complain about what's going on next door.
Exactly.
And so you went to these Common Council meetings, you kind of saw this process through, and you mentioned that the city was very conscious of the fact that, to maybe some members of the community, this might look like giving a developer free reign to do whatever they want. So, I mean, were there any members of the Common Council who expressed those concerns? And maybe how did the Common Council, would you say, work to kind of get around those?
All the officials are very conscious of those concerns from their constituents, and at the same time, they're excited about what the possibility of developing the Emerson site would mean to the community. So it's balancing that those two things and making sure as the city moves forward with this process that they're doing so in a way that won't backfire on that site or other sites. So it's been a slow-moving process, to say the least, and it's because I think they're so conscious of the fear that this could, spiral out into something different.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I know we've been talking about the Emerson side and maybe that being the impetus to get this conversation started. I mean, were there any discussions about any other parts of town that are currently zoned for industrial use that might a PUD might be approved for in the future?
I'm sure those places exist. I haven't heard of anyone's mentioned yet. Anytime that the question has been asked, why are we doing PUD now? The first thing they allude to is the Emerson site. In fact, Emerson started their application process last night, just 1 week after PUD was introduced into the legislation. So at this point, it's kind of, hey, we need this. Hey, we'll put this in here and let's get this process going. There have been no other developers to apply for a PUD yet. If the next one that applies for a PUD, that will definitely be another story.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we mentioned that Emerson has already put their application in, but I understand that there's still going to be opportunities for the public to provide their input on PUDs moving forward. So what comes next in this story?
So last night they were approved to begin their application process. The next step will be a information session for residents to kind of come learn about everything Emerson has in mind for this property, and that will take place on August 4th. I believe you'll be able to find more information about it on the city's website. And after that information session, the next step is going to be a public hearing regarding the same matter on August 13th, and that'll be, I think, 6 o'clock in Common Council chambers is usually the deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, if you've heard us talking about these planned unit developments, and this is something you'd like to share your input on, there are the two chances to do it. And I have been speaking with Michael Nocella of the Ithaca Times. We've been talking about PUDs today, but we hope to have Michael back every few weeks or so to talk about some of the other happenings in local government. So, Michael, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thanks again.